417A. The tree-lined streets of Eden Prairie, Minnesota, lay silent beneath fresh snow. Million-dollar estates dotted the landscape. Gated driveways, manicured lawns buried under winter white. Everything was still. Nothing suggested danger. That silence exploded in seconds. More than 180 federal agents descended on a luxury condominium complex near Lake Minnetonka. FBI, ICE, DEA, HSI, U.S. Marshals, ATF. Armored BearCats blocked every exit. Flashbangs lit the pre-dawn darkness like lightning. Battering rams thundered against reinforced steel doors. The building shook, glass shattered. Commands echoed through marble hallways. What they found inside would expose a network operating across 12 states. 2.8 tons of fentanyl seized in the first sweep, $127 million in cash and cryptocurrency recovered, and 87 children rescued from sealed rooms they were never meant to leave. Federal prosecutors would later call it the largest coordinated trafficking operation ever dismantled in the upper Midwest. If you're still watching, tap like now. What federal agents discovered will change how you see sanctuary policies forever. His name was Rashid Omar Hassan, 44 years old, Somali-born nonprofit director. He ran the Minnesota Refugee Housing Alliance, a charity praised by city officials for helping displaced families find shelter. On paper, he was a humanitarian, but according to federal prosecutors, he was the architect of something far darker. The investigation began 18 months earlier, not with a tip, not with surveillance, but with a single wire transfer flagged by Treasury Department analysts reviewing cross-border transactions. $420,000 moved from Minneapolis to a shell account in Mogadishu. The amount was large. The timing was impossible to ignore. It occurred 96 hours before a planned ICE enforcement sweep was publicly announced. Someone with access to federal intelligence had warned him. Operation Permanence was born that day. FBI financial crimes units began tracing the money backward through layers of corporate structures. What they found was staggering. 14 shell companies, fake daycare centers that never opened, phantom cleaning services with no employees, medical supply distributors with no inventory, each one registered legally, each one filing taxes on time, each one funneling cash overseas while claiming nonprofit humanitarian status. But the real breakthrough came 6 months into the investigation. A routine traffic stop in Street Paul. Officers pulled over a vehicle for expired tags. The driver cooperated, handed over his phone when asked. Inside that phone were encrypted messages between Hassan and officials embedded inside the Minneapolis city government. Warnings about upcoming enforcement actions. Instructions to relocate assets before inspections. Payment confirmations disguised as consulting fees and grant disbursements. The network was not hiding in shadows. It was operating inside the system itself. Federal analysts began mapping connections. Bank records showed recurring payments to a Minneapolis City Council staffer. Email logs revealed coordination with a county clerk who delayed warrant processing. Phone metadata placed Hassan in regular contact with a state legislative aide who sat on the Immigration Policy Committee. This was not street-level crime. This was institutional corruption. Comment exposed if you believe this couldn't happen without political protection at the highest levels. The breach happened fast and violent. At 4:19 a.m., the first battering ram struck the reinforced entry door of Unit 1204. 3 hits. The frame splintered. Federal agents poured through the opening. Inside, the scene was chaos. Armed guards attempted to block stairwells. Muzzle flashes lit narrow corridors. Shouting. Flashbangs detonating in sealed rooms. The smell of cordite and fear. Within 90 seconds, resistance collapsed. 12 armed operatives were face down on marble floors, hands zip-tied behind their backs. What agents found in the first sweep stunned even the most experienced officers. Unit 1204 had been converted into an industrial drug processing facility. Tables stacked with fentanyl bricks wrapped in blue plastic. Cocaine cutting stations with digital scales. Heat sealers running continuously. In the master bedroom, $4.2 million in vacuum-sealed cash bundles sat in designer luggage, already sorted by denomination and currency. But that was just the beginning. Simultaneously, federal teams struck 6 other locations across the Twin Cities metro area. At a warehouse in Street Paul's east side, agents discovered shipping containers with custom-built false compartments. Inside them, precursor chemicals for methamphetamine production. Packaging equipment. Thermal-sealed narcotics ready for interstate distribution. At a luxury high-rise in downtown Minneapolis, tactical units breached a penthouse and found surveillance equipment pointed directly at federal buildings. Encrypted servers. Laptops running data scraping software monitoring law enforcement communications. At a community center near the University of Minnesota campus, officers uncovered what appeared to be a front operation. No community services, no programming. Just cash counting machines, prepaid debit cards by the hundreds, and ledgers documenting transactions that had nothing to do with charity. But the most disturbing discovery came at a converted residential property in Bloomington. K-9 units alerted to a hidden basement entrance behind a false wall in the kitchen. Agents forced the reinforced door open. What they found below stopped them cold. Medical equipment, surgical trays, restraints bolted to concrete walls. And in the corner, 17 children ages 9 to 16, sedated and bound, numbers written on their wrists in permanent marker, not names, inventory codes. Paramedics rushed in, oxygen administered, sedatives reversed, vital signs monitored. Several children had dangerously low heart rates. Medical personnel later confirmed that without immediate intervention, survival would have been unlikely. As federal teams secured the property, agents discovered what the children were waiting for. Behind another false wall, they found travel documents, falsified passports, pre-approved visas, customs declarations already stamped and cleared for departure. The children were not being held indefinitely. They were being prepared for export. If this shocks you, imagine what's still hidden in communities across America. Hit like to push this story to people who need to see the truth. But the real discovery came 3 floors below ground level. During the initial sweep of the condominium complex, structural engineers noticed something unusual on the building blueprints. A basement level that did not match the original architectural plans. Additional square footage unaccounted for in municipal records. At 5:47 a.m., agents located the access point, a reinforced steel door hidden behind a false panel in the parking garage. Biometric scanner, military-grade locks, the kind of security that does not protect storage units or maintenance rooms. It took federal breach specialists 38 minutes to bypass the system. What they found behind that door defied every initial assessment. A 6,000 square foot underground facility, climate controlled to hospital standards, industrial ventilation systems, backup generators, battery arrays capable of sustaining operations for 72 hours without external power. This was not improvised. This was engineered. The facility was organized with warehouse-level precision. Filing cabinets lined one wall, each drawer labeled with coded identifiers. Metal shelving units held cash, bundled and sorted by currency and denomination. Safes reinforced into concrete foundations. But what stopped investigators cold were the documents. Handwritten ledgers documenting 7 years of operations. Each page detailed shipments by date, quantity, route, and destination. Payment schedules in dollars, euros, and Somali shillings. Distribution networks mapped across 15 states and 9 countries. Laptops with bypassed encryption revealed email chains between Hassan and contacts in Mexico, Somalia, Sweden, Brazil, and Dubai. The language was careful, professional, bureaucratic. Subject lines read like corporate memos. Logistics update Q3. Schedule adjustment, northern routes. Payment confirmation, facility expansion, but the attachments told a different story. Manifests listing children by number, not name, age ranges, weight, medical screening results. Status entries marked as active, in transit, transferred, or simply disposed. Each child reduced to a line item in a spreadsheet, tracking inventory and projected revenue. One document stood out among thousands, a 49-page blueprint titled Project Permanence Doctrine. It was not a plan, it was a business model. Detailed expansion strategies through 2029. Revenue projections exceeding $480 million annually. Target operational capacity of 620 individuals in continuous rotation. Contingency protocols for leadership succession. Risk mitigation strategies for federal interference. The final page contained a single sentence that investigators photographed and logged as evidence. By 2029, the system will be self-sustaining, geographically distributed, and functionally untouchable. In reinforced floor safes, agents recovered $14.7 million in cryptocurrency wallet access codes. Offshore banking statements showing account balances totaling $118 million across the Cayman Islands, Cyprus, and Panama. This was not a criminal enterprise operating on the margins of society. This was a parallel economy built inside American institutions, protected by American officials, and funded by American tax dollars routed through programs designed to protect the vulnerable. Type justice if you believe every official who enabled this network should face federal prosecution without plea agreements. The evidence pulled from encrypted devices revealed how the network had survived for nearly a decade without serious interference. Protection had been purchased systematically. Within 72 hours of the initial raids, federal financial task forces identified 19 officials on Hassan's payroll. The payments were not sporadic bribes. They were salaried positions disguised as consulting fees and non-profit grants. 2 Minneapolis police officers assigned to the Gang and Narcotics Task Force received $22,000 monthly. Their role was simple: provide advance warning of enforcement operations, delay warrant execution, redirect investigations away from protected properties. A county clerk responsible for processing federal detention orders accepted $18,000 per quarter. Court records later showed at least 43 immigration-related cases delayed, dismissed, or lost in administrative processing during her tenure. A state legislative aide working on immigration policy oversight took $34,000 every 60 days. Email traffic recovered from encrypted servers showed him feeding draft legislation and committee schedules directly to Hassan's inner circle. But the most damaging revelation involved a federal official. An ICE administrative coordinator stationed at the Minneapolis field office had been compromised. Financial records traced $47,000 in monthly payments routed through a shell nonprofit. His access to internal systems allowed Hassan's network to operate with near-perfect intelligence. Raid schedules known weeks in advance. Surveillance targets identified before operations launched. Evidence collection timelines shared in real time. The leaked messages were clinical, professional, devoid of emotion. One read, Federal Sweep planned Friday 0400 hours. Target locations include Warehouse District. Advise immediate relocation of high-value assets. Translation: move the drugs and children before dawn. Another, indictment draft under legal review. Filing delayed pending additional evidence. Estimated timeline 90 to 120 days. Translation: you have 3 months. Bury everything. A third, shipping manifest flagged for secondary inspection at MSP Cargo Terminal. Recommend alternate routing through Chicago O'Hare. Translation: avoid detection. Use the backup route. Federal investigators also identified 16 civilian enablers, attorneys who structured the shell companies, real estate agents who facilitated property purchases under false identities, bankers who processed suspicious wire transfers without filing required reports, port officials who cleared cargo manifests without inspection, customs facilitators who expedited travel documents for individuals flagged in federal databases. Each played a small role. Together, they formed a shield that made the network nearly invisible. One senior FBI investigator described it in testimony that would later be sealed. This was not corruption in the traditional sense. This was a shadow governance structure. Hassan did not operate in Minneapolis. He owned it, institutionally, financially, politically. Comment accountability if you're still paying attention. These names deserve public exposure and maximum sentencing. Once federal analysts broke the financial encryption, the true scale became undeniable. This was not a Minneapolis story. It was a national infrastructure. Banking records revealed wire transfers to 17 states, domestic hubs in Houston, Los Angeles, Miami, Phoenix, Chicago, Atlanta, and Seattle. Each city operating as a distribution node, feeding from the central Minneapolis coordination point. The narcotics alone moved at staggering volume. Conservative estimates placed annual trafficking at 14 tons of fentanyl, cocaine, methamphetamine, and heroin. Street value exceeding $890 million per year, but the drugs were only one revenue stream. Internationally, the routes stretched across 9 countries, origin points in Somalia and Venezuela, transit hubs in Dubai, Istanbul, Nairobi, Stockholm, and Panama City. Offshore financial centers in the Cayman Islands, British Virgin Islands, and Cyprus, where money laundered and disappeared into systems designed to resist audits. Intelligence briefings confirmed that Hassan's network had established relationships with Sinaloa cartel distributors in Mexico, Al-Shabaab financial operatives in East Africa, and trafficking syndicates operating across the Horn of Africa and Southeast Asia. Human trafficking and narcotics trafficking were not separate operations. They shared the same routes, the same brokers, the same protection, different cargo, same machinery. The children moved through commercial shipping channels, containers modified with hidden compartments designed to evade thermal scans and basic inspections. Just enough ventilation, just enough space, just enough sedation to prevent noise during transit. Federal analysts identified 24 outbound containers that had already cleared U.S. ports over the previous 18 months. Destinations included clinics in Karachi, underground markets in Sao Paulo, and medical facilities in Guangzhou, where organs were harvested and sold to international buyers. Recovery rates for trafficked children who leave U.S. territory fall below 4%. Intelligence agencies confirmed that statistic in classified briefings. That number alone explained why the raid timing had been so critical. Financial tracing revealed the full scope of the money. Over an 8-year operational period, more than $3.1 billion had flowed through Hassan's network. Shell nonprofits, migrant housing grants, humanitarian subsidies, medical outreach funding. All of it recycled, laundered, and routed offshore in transactions designed to survive quarterly audits without raising red flags. The system did not evade oversight. It exhausted it. Auditors checked compliance boxes. Reports were filed on schedule. Funding requests approved by officials who never questioned line items because the paperwork appeared legitimate. And while regulators reviewed forms, children disappeared between budget cycles. Share this video. They count on silence. Your engagement makes networks like this impossible to sustain. When the last warrant was executed and the final evidence logged, the numbers told a story of scale that few could comprehend. Total arrests across Minnesota and 6 other states, 284 individuals in federal custody. Rashid Omar Hassan and his top 12 lieutenants face charges under RICO statutes, the Trafficking Victims Protection Act, narco-terrorism provisions, and federal money laundering laws. 19 public officials indicted on corruption charges, obstruction of justice, conspiracy, bribery, racketeering. Asset seizures reached $287 million. Cash, cryptocurrency, real estate, luxury vehicles, offshore accounts, and business holdings, all frozen under federal forfeiture laws. But the most important number was 87. 87 children rescued, transferred immediately to secure medical facilities under federal protection. More than 70% showed signs of prolonged sedation. 41 required immediate cardiac monitoring. 19 were treated for severe respiratory suppression and malnutrition. Doctors confirmed that transport delays of even 6 to 8 hours would have resulted in fatalities. Federal authorities initiated long-term care plans, trauma counseling, medical rehabilitation, identity protection programs. New documentation issued. Previous records, many falsified or forged, were sealed to prevent tracking by the networks that had once controlled them. The estimated cost of care exceeded $140 million over 5 years, funded entirely through emergency federal allocations. No price, officials stated in congressional testimony, was too high to restore futures that had nearly been erased. Beyond the hospitals and courtrooms, the system itself began to change. Within 45 days, ports across the United States revised inspection protocols. Thermal imaging technology upgraded. Randomized container checks increased by 51%. Shipping manifests tied to humanitarian organizations or refugee services were reclassified for enhanced scrutiny. None of this made headlines. Security works best, federal officials noted, when it does not advertise vulnerabilities. Internationally, consequences moved swiftly. Federal prosecutors issued 22 international arrest warrants targeting brokers, logistics coordinators, medical intermediaries, and financial custodians operating in Mexico, Somalia, Brazil, Pakistan, and Sweden. Requests for cooperation were transmitted through diplomatic channels to 9 countries. Early responses indicated willingness to extradite. Intelligence briefings acknowledged a grim reality. International recovery operations historically succeed in fewer than 5% of cases. That statistic underscored how close this network had come to becoming irreversible. At home, oversight tightened across every level of government. Congressional committees launched formal inquiries into migrant housing programs, nonprofit funding transparency, and emergency waiver provisions granted during periods of civil unrest or disaster declarations. Early findings revealed systemic vulnerabilities, temporary exemptions that became permanent loopholes, inspections deferred indefinitely under safety justifications, reporting requirements diluted in the name of speed, compassion, and administrative efficiency. What had begun as flexibility had quietly transformed into structural weakness. Minneapolis returned to a version of calm, but not to comfort. Streets grew quieter, patrols normalized, protests faded. Yet trust did not rebound easily. Attendance at city council meetings tripled. Public records requests surged by more than 300%. Citizens who had once assumed someone else was watching began asking harder, more direct questions. The most sobering conclusion came from a classified after-action review conducted by federal intelligence analysts. The network had been operational for at least 9 years, moving children, narcotics, and money through systems explicitly designed to protect public welfare. During that period, annual profits exceeded $2.1 billion, while losses to law enforcement averaged less than 2%. The machine had not depended on secrecy. It depended on routine, on the assumption that evil announces itself loudly. This one did not. It wore the language of charity. It hid behind procedure, and it nearly succeeded because everyone was looking elsewhere. This is not an outlier. This is a warning. What collapsed in Minneapolis is operating in dozens of cities across the United States right now, behind legitimate facades. Inside programs designed to protect the vulnerable, under the authority of officials who have stopped questioning outcomes. The United Nations estimates that 40 million people worldwide are trapped in trafficking networks. Annual global criminal revenue exceeds $150 billion. These are not abstract numbers. They represent lives stolen, futures erased, families destroyed. These networks survive because systems allow them to survive. Officials accept bribes. Employers want cheap labor and do not ask questions. Auditors check boxes without investigating anomalies. Communities assume someone else is watching. And in that gap between assumption and reality, trafficking becomes routine. What happened in Minneapolis is happening in Houston, in Los Angeles, in Chicago, in Atlanta, in wealthy suburbs and struggling neighborhoods, behind walls that appear normal from the outside. The networks are adaptive. They change routes when enforcement tightens. They change methods when technology improves. They change faces when leaders fall. But they do not disappear. They relocate. They wait. They rebuild. Because the conditions that allowed them to thrive in Minneapolis still exist in cities where no one has started asking questions yet. Federal investigators confirm that additional networks have been identified. Investigations are expanding. Resources are being deployed. But enforcement alone cannot solve a problem this deeply embedded. Vigilance cannot be temporary. Oversight cannot be optional. Accountability cannot stop at the people who got caught. Hit like so, this story reaches communities where networks like this still operate in silence. Comment your reaction below. Say what you really think about sanctuary policies that prioritize procedure over protection. Share this with someone who believes enforcement is unnecessary. They need to see how protection enables the worst crimes imaginable. Subscribe so you don't miss the follow-up investigations that expose where these networks relocated. The children were saved this time because someone finally followed the evidence all the way through. Past the noise, past the money, past the political protection, before the silence became permanent. But 87 rescued means thousands still trapped in systems that have not collapsed yet. Justice requires witnesses, accountability demands attention, and change happens only when people refuse to look away. This is not the end of the story. The fight continues.